Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be driving out into the Cotswolds, getting coffee, and then I am going to be jumping in the 981 to see whether I made the right choice buying a 987. The reason I'm deciding to compare these two cars is obviously because they're both Boxsters of two different generations, but also with the amount of money I've spent on my 987, I could have got myself in a 981S. So I'm going to see whether you should buy a 987 because they are fantastic value for money, or whether you should save up and try and get in a 981. And as if by magic, as I'm talking about how much money I've spent on the car, the engine warning light has just come on. But that does add to my thoughts. These cars, with them getting older, reliability does come into play. There's small electrical faults, suspension may need doing, things have perished. You wouldn't have that on a more modern car. So I'm not sure if you would have that on a 981. So you may be buying a cheaper car, but the maintenance may catch up with you. So we have got here with the 981 parked alongside. So let's get out and have a look and compare. So this is just from the interior of the 987. You all know what this looks like. Big upgrade I feel from this generation to the next is the key. So in this key, pretty standard key, 3 buttons, lock, unlock, front and rear. And with the lock and unlock, I find it still, sometimes I don't know whether I have or haven't locked it. Whereas with the 981 key, this is when they really stepped up the game and they're still using this style of key for the more modern stuff, the 992 and 718, because it's in the shape of a car, which I think is really cool. And it's got the lock, unlock on separate buttons as well as the front and the rear. And you can get these side bits in the body colour of the car. So it would be, in this case, a sapphire metallic. But let's jump outside and we'll be able to compare one from the other. So the main difference I feel from the front is definitely the headlights. You can see that here with the 981 Boxster and Cayman just differentiating themselves from the 911 of the time. Looking at the front end of this versus the 911 of this year, which was a 991, it does look like a totally separate model, whereas this can still be coming at you head on, still could look like a 911. So I think Porsche are really trying to go in a different direction with the 981. Of course, it's got the xenon headlights, which is a massive upgrade. I think I've got xenons on this, but just the overall look of them just looks like a much more modern car. Of course, we've still got the fuel filler cap. This is what I feel is the major difference between the two cars, is if you look at the 987, the intake almost sits flush with the car, whereas on the 981, it's got this really dramatic intake here, which I think just adds a load of presence to the car, and it has this leading line up into it along with here, whereas on the 987 it is all just flat and almost blends into the side there. So I really like this. So that is one of the major things that I think updates the car. Even when we got here, in fact, there was a Dutch family that came up and was taking photos of the 981. No one looked at mine, so maybe that's the colour, maybe silver just doesn't grab the eyes of this sapphire metallic, but I think it's also because it does look like just a much more dramatic side profile. But coming around to the back, this is another area where I think there are some major changes. As you can see, this has sort of a ducktail spoiler and definitely kicks up at the end, whereas the 987 slopes down. Now, I feel that is because in the 987 it almost lacks direction, where it's hard to see which way it's pointing, but here they definitely fixed that with raising the rear as well and making it look just quite a bit more muscular and aggressive. Of course, with the centre tailpipes as well, which of course is carried through. That's been lost in the 718 now, but yeah, just looking at that side profile of the 981 versus the 987, you can see it has just really stepped it up. A nice feature about the 987 or the 981, sorry, versus the 987 is that in here you have that manual latch to start off taking the roof down, whereas you don't have that
in the more modern car, which means if you just hold down the unlock button when you're walking up to your car on a nice summer's day, by the time you get to the car, the roof is off and waiting for you. That can of course be done in reverse as well to put the roof up if you hold the lock button. But from the inside here, you can see that this center console has all been raised up, making a bit more of a divide between the driver and a passenger. It's got a screen now, which was an option on the later 987s, but as you can see, not on mine. All of the temp switches and air conditioning is all in the same place, so you won't feel, if you were coming from an older car to a newer car, you would feel right at home. Everything is exactly where you'd expect it. We've got the Sport Chrono there, and here is where the roof controls are. So with this being the GTS, you've got your Sport, Sport Plus and PASM, and also the exhaust switch, which when we start driving, we will find out what that sounds like. But this is another main change. Turn that off. Another main change on the more modern car, the 981, is the instrument cluster in the middle. Just to the right, you've got this little screen which gives you so much information. My favourite one to use is this G-force meter. You can see how hard you're taking corners, but it gives you radio control, phone control, trip computer, tyre monitoring, and the Sport Chrono can be controlled from here, so you can time your commutes. I think the interior there, those are the main key changes. Hang on, let's just get this roof up. So with that interior, I think those are the main key changes, but coming from one to another, it all does feel very similar. Even the door handles are the same shape as in the old ones, and that has carried through to the more modern cars as well. So that was a quick walk around of the outside and the inside. We are going to grab a coffee, then I'll be taking this for a drive. So I will catch you in a bit. The 981 GTS. I'm going to treat this as just a 981S rather than a GTS, just because an S would be in the price range that I'm looking at. Straight off the bat, main difference, no physical handbrake. Got an electric one, which is actually quite nice because it cleans up the center console. So immediate thoughts. The gear stick is higher up than in my car, but that is actually quite nice, having it quite within a hand's reach from the wheel. That is nice. It feels much more premium. It's very insulated, as I said, and you can't hear the engine whirring around behind you as much as you can in the 987. I guess that's because this firewall is probably a lot thicker in this car. But in terms of everything else, the engine does sound. The engine's got a totally different sound to the older engines that's in a 987. Let's just try and get some of that noise to see if you can hear it. Yeah, it does sound good. And even the base 2.7 versions of the 981 do sound pretty similar. I mean, regardless, throughout the range, you're going to be getting a good sounding car because they're all the flat sixes. I've got the roof up and this is a Boxster, so anything under 30 miles an hour, you can knock the roof down. And it does feel like it's a quicker action than in my car. And now you can just hear all of that exhaust noise. So this is a GTS, so it does have an optional valved exhaust, but you can get that on the S as well. So we're coming up to national speed limit, and let's just see how this sounds. All the way up to 7.5. And then coming down the gears as well. It's got pops and crackles, which isn't something that you get on a 987. I don't know if you can hit. Woo!
I mean, for the noise alone, that is fantastic. And I haven't heard a 987 sounding this good. I would say that's one of the main selling points for this car. In terms of the power, I think this is about 330, which sounds like quite a big step up from the 987S. But the way that the power comes in, it doesn't feel unmanageable or anything like that. You do find that you are gathering speed a lot quicker, but it's not like your GT4s and things like that have over 400 horsepower. I feel like that might even be too much for the road. So I think 300-ish, give or take, is perfect. But we're coming down into a village now, so let's test out the brakes. So they do stop very well. So the brakes in this feel a lot more assisted than in the 987. That is something that is a characteristic of the 987, is having slightly unassisted brakes, which means you do have to stomp on them quite heavily for them to actually do anything, which when I bought my 987, pulling out of the place that I bought it from, I did actually almost go into the back of a police car just because I wasn't used to the pedal feel. This feels like any other car really, Volkswagen Group, something like that. Just the slightest push on the pedal and it brings you right down. So that's a step up in my eyes. Clutch feel feels lighter, feels quite light and manageable, which is perfect. So these cars can be dailies, and having these slightly lighter controls is actually quite welcome. There's no escaping that noise though, it's just so good. You find yourself doing quite large speeds at times where you didn't intend to, and then just downshifting. Oh, as much as you can. Let's see if it will. Oh, it even does it into first gear. Oh. Let's cool it down, let's cool it down. We're going into a village. When driving this, I have had people looking and turning as I drive past, which isn't something that happens in my car. So it may be the colour, but I mean, it still looks almost like a supercar. For you can get a cheap one of these 981s, you'd be looking at early 20s, and for early 20s, a car that looks and drives this well, I don't think you're going to find much else on the market. And that sounds that good as well. Overall though, the main question that I wanted to raise with this video is, did I make the right decision going for a 987 versus a 981? I'm still unsure, and I still think about it quite often. With the 981s, the engines are pretty much bulletproof. I haven't heard of any major issues. So if I wanted peace of mind, definitely I would have got one of these. So to answer the question, I don't regret buying my 987, but I think one of these would be a very good car for the money. So if you have enjoyed the video, do like and subscribe and comment and all the usual stuff. This car, if you are interested on seeing more on this car specifically, do let me know in the comments below. But apart from that, I will see you in the next one.